On a wet Thursday in March, a founder named Liam sat alone in his kitchen, staring at his Meta dashboard on a flickering laptop. For the first time in a month, his ads actually looked good. CPL was down 35%, CTR was up, relevance score was solid, and yet Stripe has just emailed him a warning. If nothing changes, you will not have enough funds to cover next month's payroll. Well, he told himself it had to be a platform issue. Meta's numbers are lying and the ads were sending junk. It wasn't the ads though. What was killing his agency was hiding somewhere else entirely. And by the end of the story, that's the part you may not be able to unsee in your own CRM. Now, if you run a B2B AI automation or agentic agency stuck somewhere between $40,000 to $80,000 a month and you want to grow without burning yourself into the floor, this is for you. All I do here is take agencies in that band, cut them open, and show where the constraint actually was and how we fix that in a 12-week sprint. I put out one of these breakdowns every week, so if you don't want to be the same revenue bin a year from now, subscribe and stick around. So back to Liam in 2025. He and his co-founder ran a 4-person automation shop out in London. They were doing a little over $60K a month, 18 clients, 1 setter, 2 technical implementers. They had a handful of solid case studies and a few logos they were proud to show on the website. Meta had been okay, but expensive. They posted occasional YouTube long forms, some LinkedIn rants, a small email list, but nothing went viral. The leads trickled in. And inside the company, their identity was clear. We're the ops nerds in a sea of hype. They prided themselves on never missing a deployment date, even if that meant 70-hour weeks, 11 p.m. Loom replies, and answering Slack on the weekends. Their flaw was just as clear though. Everything after lead generated lived in the fog. If a prospect really wanted it, they'd book a call. But that was brief. And by the time that Thursday night rolled around, it looked like a straightforward ads problem. Click-throughs were down, competitors were flooding the feed with AI agent offers, and when they finally found a new batch of creatives that dropped CPL from $150 to $90, it felt like salvation. And yet, their calendar was emptier than ever. To understand why everything broke down there, we need to go back to 9 months earlier, to a decision that felt harmless when they made it. So 9 months earlier, the agency was hovering around $50K a month. Meta was still the main driver. They just come off a strong quarter where a single campaign had filled the calendar with sales calls. Leads were expensive, but they converted. The internal story became, we are good at ads. We just need more of them. So when performance started to slip, the diagnosis was obvious. Meta is dying. We need better creatives, more budget, and maybe another platform. CPL had crept from $80 to $150 over the past 6 months. The first sign something else was going on looked like bad luck. One of their better fit retainers quietly churned. Their prospects email blamed budget cuts and internal changes. They shrugged. Well, because every agency loses a client now and then, right? And 2 months later, Meta's performance deteriorated even further. CPL jumped, and in a late night meeting, they agreed to double the ad spend for the next 30 days. The only way out is through, Leo told the team. Then the logic was simple. Double the ad spend, double the leads, double the calls. Leads did go up though, but calls barely moved. They told themselves it was lead quality. These new audiences are colder. We just need to keep optimizing. 4 weeks after that, they finally hit a personal record. More applications in 1 week they ever seen before. Their SDR fell slammed with follow-up. But when they did look at the calendar, there were actually fewer booked calls than the same week last year. Show rates had slipped as well. More no-shows didn't reschedule. The internal story shifted though. Maybe the offer is losing steam. Let's redo the landing page and the VSL. So they rewrote the headlines, changed the hooks from AI pipeline order to agentic revenue sprints, argued about thumbnails, the button colors. The next month, CPL improved. Calendar did not. And by the time we got to that Thursday night in March, the situation has escalated on every axis. Ad costs were up overall, lead volume were up relative to 3 months prior, but the core qualities were down. Cash buffer has shrunk to 6 weeks of runway. It looked like a cruel joke. More results in ad managers, but less money in real life. Then that's the macro question that nobody in the company could answer yet. If ads were finally producing more and cheaper leads again, why was the calendar still a ghost town? For a while though, every new piece of data folded back into the same story. Meta's just sending junk traffic now, the market's getting saturated, and everyone offering AI, buyers are numb. And every explanation was emotionally satisfying, but none of them actually accounted for what was actually on the screen. And that's when one line in CRM finally broke the illusion. In a weekly review, almost by accident, someone put out a simple report. Leads created last 30 days versus booked calls. For one segment, it showed 217 new leads, 9 calls. Liam stared at it for a second and said, "That can't be right. We must not be tracking all the calls." It was a reasonable thought. And if the CRM was wrong, you could dismiss the problem again, except the dialogues backed it up. The calendars backed it up. The Stripe backed it up too. The leaks weren't happening inside the ad managers. They were happening right after the opt-in. And at this point, they still believed they had a traffic problem. They didn't. They were about to find out that something much worse. A follow-up system so slow and anemic that extra leads fell into a bigger hole. Up to this point, the trusted hero in this story was actually Meta. Meta has gotten them to the first 50K, and Meta had produced their best case study clients. Meta was a dashboard they checked first thing every morning. But whatever happens, we know how to make Meta work. That was the internal mantra. They also trusted another invisible hero though, the assumption that follow-up is handled. They had a CRM, they had 3 email sequences that went out automatically, and they had someone called a setter. And in their mind, the box was checked. When we start digging though, that's where the story turned. Median speed to lead on qualified inbound was between 3 to 6 hours. On weekends or busy days, it went up to 24 hours plus. And roughly half of the leads received exactly 1 manual touch. Many never got touched at all. Everything went through email. No standard SMS, no LinkedIn, no phone calls on day 1. There was no 7-day cadence, no dedicated power hour, no SLA that said A-tier leads must be hit within 5 minutes. In other words, the thing they trusted, we are good at ads, and CRM handled the follow-ups, was the quiet villain. Every time they turned up the ad spend, they weren't filling the calendar, they were filling the leak. Once they saw that, the rest of the puzzle snapped into places. We went back to the true beginning of this mess. It wasn't the night of the payroll scare. It started nearly a year earlier when they launched their big boy campaign and decided a simple 3 email drip was good enough to follow up. Decision A, set and forget email sequence, no SLA. That created condition B. Lead will wait hours before hearing a human. If they were in Europe and opted in late, they might not hear from anyone until the next day. Condition B caused behavior C. A lot of those leads did what you do when you fill out a form and no one reaches out quickly. They forgot. They went back to the day. They booked with whoever called them first. And behavior C produced result D. Lead to call conversion sagged. At first, just a little, from 25% to maybe 18%. And the founders didn't notice because the absolute number of calls still were fine. But result D triggered decision E. It must be the ads. Let's rebuild the campaign and if needed, spend our way through this. So they rebuilt the creatives, audiences, offers, and CPL improved. Lead volume went up, flowed straight into the same broken follow-up system. And lead to call percentage actually dropped again. Calls per week flattened or declined despite better ad metrics. And calls that did happen were often 7 to 10 days after the opt-in, which meant interest was basically none. No shows went up, and the result in crisis F, the revenue slowed. 2 good retainers churned, and to replace them, Liam doubled the ad spend for the next 30 days. And Meta started working again. More leads, cheaper, and because nothing in the follow-up had changed, those leads just created more abandonment and no-shows. And the P&L reflected this perfectly. Acquisition costs rising, pipeline was light, team overworked, runway shrinking, and the entire thing looked like a stopped working story. But it was actually never built a real lead to core system story. And once you see that, you cannot unsee the evidence. CPL improved and calls didn't, because no one contacted leads fast enough. And no-shows increased because most bookings were far out and barely nudged. And people blamed lead quality when half of the leads never got a real shot. So we ran one lane, one KPI, and one sprint. We stopped obsessing over CPM and CPL and put a giant number on top of the weekly scoreboard. Of the qualified leads that opted in this week, what percentage booked a call within the 7 days? At that time, that number hovered around 6 to 8%. And we set a conservative target though, 20 to 25% over the next 12 weeks. The math was simple enough that even the most creative founders couldn't argue with it. They averaged around 100 qualified leads a week. At 6%, that was 6 calls a week. And at a close rate of 30% and 3K per month per client, 6 calls per week, that's roughly 2 clients per month. That's 3K extra GP per month. If we did nothing to ads and simply pushed 7-day lead to call to 20%, 100 leads will equal to 20 calls a week. 20 times 30% equal to 6 new clients a month. At 1.5K growth profit each, that was roughly around 9,000 extra gross profit a month. And over a year, that's roughly 108K in gross profit difference without touching the ad account. All we did technically was install a 5-minute SLA for A and B tier leads, build a 7-day multi-channel sequence, emails, SMS, LinkedIn and phone, and carve out a non-negotiable 60-minute daily power hour just to follow up. Give the setter a simple rule. No lead dies without at least a 7 to 12 serious touch in the first week. When we protect a few guardrails so the fix didn't move the problem, the percentage of calls with real ICP that stayed high, show rate couldn't tank as we compressed booking windows, total calls per week had to stay within what the closer could actually handle. And unsubscribes and complaints from new sequences should stay the same. Well, 3 months later, the ad account looked boring. Same platform, similar budget, no secret targeting, but their CRM told a very different story. 7-day lead to call percentage has climbed to north of 22%. Qualified calls per week roughly tripled. Okay? The founder stopped saying Meta is broken and started saying we were dead to half the leads we paid for. So today, the agency is back to the high 70s and low 80s per month. They spend less on ads than the night Liam almost missed the payroll. There's one image that carries the whole story though. Liam still opens Meta every morning, but the tab he opens before that is now a simple spreadsheet. Leads this week, calls booked this week, shows, closes, and every weekday at 9 AM, his phone goes up in plane mode. The CRM comes up. For 1 quiet hour, he and his setter do nothing but move people from maybe to yes or no. And that 1 hour prints more money than any creative test that ran for the past 12 months. If parts of this feel uncomfortably familiar, ads cost up, lead technically coming in, calendars suspiciously light, everyone's blaming our platform, well, that's not an accident. You might be looking at a wrong dashboard. So I break down stuck to scale stories like these for B2B AI agencies between $40,000 to $80,000 every week. And if you're in that band and see yourself in this, do 2 things. Take the 5-minute constraint finder and see if it tags you as F, and book a free 45-minute deep dive. We'll pull up your last 4 to 12 weeks of numbers and see if the real villain is sitting untouched inside your follow-up. The only thing is that you don't keep pouring money into a leak that you never measure. Because most people do. Don't be most people.